Super. Hi, how are you all doing?
Hi,
Good.
very
Good.
well, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Nyana.
Hi, Monica. Hello, Julia, and
Hello,
hello, Sarah.
Diana.
Hi, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. So what I'm going to do for our watch, I'm just going to go over, I mentioned earlier, but I'm just going to sort of go over who you are and what we're just going to have a little bit of a chat about now. Nyana here is the co-founder of We Hear You, which is India's only support group for families who've lost loved ones due to suicide. She has a master's in psychology and the neuroscience of mental health from King's College London. She is a trained mental health and suicide interventionist. She also has a master's in social policy from the London School of Economics and spent 13 years in the non-profit education sector, working towards bringing quality education to public sector schools in Mumbai and Pune. Julia Alden, hi Julia, is a teacher and school leader in international education. She loves leading schools in fostering education's essential components in teaching and learning, developing best practices across the school. She has an additional diploma as a therapeutic wellbeing practitioner, combining teaching and learning with whole school wellbeing development and social emotional capacity building in young children. Learning and wellbeing are inextricably linked, and their development goes hand in hand in schools. And we have Monica with us still as well. Monica is a neuroscience enthusiast, an NLP practitioner and mindfulness expert. She believes in storytelling and a positive mindset, which are two invaluable gifts that can be passed on to children. Her passion for promoting storytelling and expression led her to start Authoring Me. Monica's child-centric approach has helped many children explore their individual talents. So thank you all for coming in. Monica, first of all, tell us a little bit about your background in this sort of neuroscience and storytelling and why it's important.
Well, my academic background is in science, and I love exploring about scientific findings that are delivered through neuroscience. So I love to know how child's brain work and what in terms of and I'm also I believe that power of words and how words can impact our brain. And recent scientific studies show that the words, positive words, they can even alter the genes expression in oh sorry, Nayana. Yeah. So that mainly because having gone through a difficult childhood, I suffered with expression. I was not a very expressive child, and journaling has helped me to bring out my emotions. So I totally believe in storytelling, and neuroscience helped me understand how our brain works and how we can keep it calm, how we can explore or make tools to help children understand how they learn, how their thoughts work, how their emotions can change their outlook, or how their mindset can affect the whole surroundings. So all these things combined, I love creating tools for children to promote expression in them, to give them that that give something to them, so that they can write well, they can express themselves in a better way. So that is my passion, and that has led me to create Authoring Me.
Okay, yeah, and like you say, I think it becomes such an important journey for children to be able to express themselves in that way. Yes. And writing and imaginative writing is a beautiful way to do that. So Julia, come in and tell us a little bit about your experience, sort of connected to that and storytelling and well-being.
Yes, not so much storytelling, but definitely well-being. I mean, when I was in education for 35 years, and I taught extensively, and then I was a school leader, mostly in international schools, but I started out in the United States. And I think that when I retired a few years ago, I wanted to do something that well-being was coming into to the scene of things. And I had seen that also in my own practice, that we were beginning to spend more focus on children's well-being. And I wanted to understand more deeply what that meant in terms of a school system, in terms of what we could be doing in school. So I did get this certificate. It was a certificate, 3 years at the Institute for Arts and Therapy in Education in London. And then that allowed me to work one-on-one with children to help develop their social emotional capacities. And I think that really, since I retired, it's been an exploration for me to understand, well, what is this idea of well-being for children in schools? What really should we be doing in schools to promote that? And I was really interested in a couple of words that Monica and Ekta brought up before, and that was empowerment and self-expression. And I think that those are two essential words in this world of well-being. And self-expression can come through writing and storytelling, but it can come through many different ways. Self-expression, and I think.
Do you think that?
Sorry.
As you say, you focused on those words, the self-expression. Do you think that's sort of key to well-being? Because I think you're right. I think a lot of people potentially sort of hear the phrase well-being being talked about a lot, but don't really understand what it means.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think self-expression is entirely important for that. And I also think one of the other things that I've come to really believe is this idea of self-knowledge, of understanding what's oneself. And that is something that schools, I think, need to be spending a lot more time on. Not just schools, everyone, of course, but I think understanding oneself is really the basis for well-being, knowing who you are, knowing your identity, your strengths, and we can start that with young children. So self-expression is a way to understand ourselves, whether it's storytelling or art or all kinds of things. And it's also, it's also about very much in schools building up this idea of our strengths. This is what I can do. This is what I can use to help myself, to be resilient, and to get to know that very, very well at a very young age, so that you're building on that constantly. So I think, I guess I could say that my whole since I'm retired, my whole thing in life right now is to explore this idea of what does help children to flourish.
Okay, thank you. So Nyana, let's bring you in and just have a talk about some of the work you do, which sounds to me as if it's, again, inextricably linked to, obviously, well-being as well. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment.
So at the moment, I work specifically in the mental health space in India with a wide range of young adults, children, to parents and families, because of course we know about how important a child's environment is to his or her growth, well-being, brain development, all of those other factors. And very, very importantly, what Julia said is a lot of what we do focuses on the aspect of the self. But the approach we're using here in the organization I work with, called Safe Space, is to create the safe spaces to be able to explore the sense of self. And self being, we're looking at it not just maybe identity, but also from a psycho-spiritual approach, which is to talk about the self as a more essence and what you're born with and what is natural to you, and then therefore what personality you create, what coping strategies, how the environment plays a role, how families, values, differentiation, identity, and all of those other factors play a role in a child's life. We are also very, very, feel very strongly about the essence of what we call, as Monica and Julia talk about, self-expression from the standpoint of having the ability to hold my own, be my own, kind of in a world that is constantly asking you to be something else than who you are. And how do you hold that in a space to say it's safe to be who I am, and I can still flourish in that way. So a lot of what the work that we, is, and what really is something that I feel strongly about after being in the education sector for 15 years with underprivileged children in India that come from tremendous poverty and other obstacles to daily living. our focus is so much on academics and the score, and yes, that's a reality. That's what we say will define where they end up in life, but who actually teaches them about life? Who teaches them about challenges? Who teaches them how to navigate a relationship? Who's teaching them how to love, or how do you stay and not run in a relationship? How do you hold your own in and those are things that today we see around us is what is breaking down, and we're not taught these things. And that's an equal aspect of well-being and helping a child express what's going on for them. And if a child is not able to kind of express what they're doing, whether it's through storytelling or other factors that Julia said, there are several ways to express oneself. But we're all just, I don't know the exact quote, but I genuinely believe we're all a bunch of stories and chapters waiting to be written into a book. And, that's literally who we are as individuals. We're stories, and stories we tell ourselves every day about every incident and every person and every interaction. And giving children the platform to explore that, I think, is incredible, and something I feel strongly about as well. But that's just something that we've been working on, yeah.
And you picked up on almost the modern reality of people not focusing on self-expression. Do you think that there's sort of a period when that happened, or is this just something that's sort of gradually, and it's now that things, because there's a lot of people talking about well-being, is that perhaps over the pandemic we've become more aware of that, or do you think it's been a very long period of adjustment, if you like?
So I think it's been something that has been happening for a long time. And I think COVID has just brought it out into the open a lot more. Because for the first time, we were actually called into rooms with family who probably didn't speak to each other, or didn't, we just are literally on what I call a remote control, doing the same things every single day. And we're assuming that's what it is. And now all of a sudden you're all set in a room together and nobody really knows how to interact with each other anymore. Technology has its bits to play, school has its bits to play, stressful lives have its bits to play. And let's be honest, I mean, who we were 30, 40 years ago, society today is completely different. There are generational gaps, there are, all sorts of different gaps that we are trying to fill in. But what we've gone furthest away is from what is core to human beings, and that is communication and expression, connection. And expression is the biggest form of connection. So I say this has been, sort of like snowballing. It's just that I think the pandemic has brought it up in a bigger, and it's like literally in your face probably now. But that's just my, sort of personal experience, or over the years.
What do you think, Julia? Sort of same sort of question in terms of the time span, how well focus has changed.
Well, I agree with that, and I'm looking at it from since I'm here as an educationist, I'm looking at it from that perspective, and I think that throughout the world we can see, it's not just here in the UK or in the United States, the crisis that has happened with children at all levels of schools. And not that there weren't crises before and children were struggling with this idea of not being able to self-express, or to carry a lot of things that they come to school with and not have any place to put those things. But I think during COVID, it's just been magnified. I mean, we are seeing that around us all the time. So schools have to, in some way, and it's not just schools, it's really much deeper. It's systems and political systems. It's a big, it's really, sometimes
there are so many influences on families and children now. So like you say, it isn't just the school, because there's all of this information that can come from all different places, and the narratives are very different as to what you're reading. So somehow the message has got to be connected in some way, so that we're getting the correct message across, I think. And I think you're right.
And the people who are the decision makers also have to be extremely involved in this. But I just wanted to add one more thing about that, and that is that like I've had different experiences in different school systems, and I've been very privileged to work in international school systems. But what I have seen in many places is this incredible, we've got to achieve, we've got to have academic achievement at the cost of we could say children's well-being, teachers' well-being, and so I think that we're definitely having to look at that very deeply right now, because we have to challenge ourselves in schools about what do we really need to be doing. Of course, we need to be doing academics, but it needs to be balanced with this other aspect of self-expression, well-being, which is very broad, but yes.
Yeah. And also just say those of you watching, if you've got any questions for any of our panelists, then pop them into the comments and we'll direct them for you. I think that's interesting. I think in my experience, my children are quite young, they're 6 and 4. And there's been a change even from my daughter, who's the eldest, to my son, who's just come into school now. The curriculum has changed focus in terms of how they're teaching the sort of early years reading, because there had been some research into how, which is, you know, kind of going forward quite quickly with phonics and stuff. And by the time they got to year 8, sort of 7 and 8, they're realizing that they didn't have the understanding that they thought, because children are sponges and they pick up things so quickly. So it would seem that they are coming in and understanding it, and then they get a bit later on that they don't have a deeper understanding because we're rushing through with this education. And that's where I think having a mindfulness and well-being, so that they've got an understanding of what they're doing, is going to help with that.
Yes, and research is showing that. Research is showing, and we all know that if children are struggling with their health or mental well-being, they have problems in school usually. So it's really, really important that we get that and we understand that, and that we're doing some transformational kinds of decisions about what we're doing at school, so that we can turn that situation around or make it better. Better. Yeah.
And I think because of the lack of freedom that obviously everyone has had, but that impact on young children, I think it already existed pre-pandemic because of the way that the world is now, and then pandemic, that's suddenly, the lack of freedom. Monica, what do you think in terms of how you can help, say, as a parent? There are tools you can use at home to understand what your child might be going through, because those expressions might come out in different behaviors and that kind of thing. What do you think?
Sure, because what I have seen when, as a parent, we invest so much time in equipping our children with academics and other stuff, but we invest a very little time in nurturing their inner world, which is like who they are, what is their inner voice telling them, what is their thoughts, what is their self-image. So to build those to nurture that inner world, we have various tools like affirmations work beautifully with young children from 0 to 5. It works miraculously because they don't understand they don't develop the sense of validation where whatever information you pass on to them, it is facts for them, and they see this information seeps into them very easily. And that is the time, if we tell them about affirmations, if we reinforce them that you are loved, you can do it, simple phrases, simple positive words can strengthen their inner voice, can help them have a positive image about themselves. And that is the inner world, because the inner voice, that friendly, encouraging inner voice, can help them overcome the phases, overcome the challenges that they face in their daily life. So simple things like taking them into nature, talking about how they can learn from trees, how resilient they are, how nothing is permanent, how thoughts are also thoughts. So little things, if we inculcate those things in our daily regimes, we can help children, help them nurture their inner world, inner voice, and that is the way forward, rather than just focusing on, yes, you have to learn, you have to do this. And also we have to reintroduce reading and writing to them in a different way, not just an academic task. These are the tools, these are the life skills they must have, because we learn so many lessons when we read a story, isn't it? Life lessons are learned in a safest boundary, in your heart, in your home. And this is what we should be encouraging. And writing, again, it doesn't have to be academic. Anytime you feel low, you can grab a pen, you can write your emotions, and you can reflect on it. You
And
can
does that go back to the journaling that you talked about before, and
yes.
introducing journaling to children at quite a young age?
Yes, and having worked with so many children, like more than 1,000 children we have worked with, we have seen how beautifully it has helped them to understand themselves. I can give you a story here. There was and you will show that story later on in the program, Zara.
Oh, yeah.
When she came to us for creative writing, she was going through a very difficult time. Her younger sister was diagnosed with a serious illness, and her world, outside world, was like little in chaos, and it was reflected in her inner world. When she came to the class, she could not write even a single sentence. She was crying, she was in tears. But after working with her, gradually we instilled that confidence in her, that yes, you can do it, you have that talent, just try to express simple phrases. Writing an acrostic poem about your unique qualities helped her understand, what are my strengths, who am I can do this. And that helped her immensely. And she, at the end of the course, she created a very beautiful story, which then we turned into a book.
Yeah.
And she raised money for the charity, the same charity who was Gosh, Great Ormond Street Hospital. And she raised £700 for that from the sale of her book. And she and the smile and the confidence that was reflected in her eyes after that was immense. It was
And I
so
think
fulfilling for us.
yeah, and it's such an interesting journey, because again, it goes back to empowerment, because at the beginning of that journey, she's feeling powerless. There's nothing she can do to affect the situation. And yet just by writing a story and raising some money, she has then had something to have some control over that situation and contributed and been a part of it, which is lovely.
Yeah.
So Nyana, what do you think in terms of affirmations? Sometimes things that you use, is that a tool that you use?
So we don't use affirmations. What we really kind of get people to understand is to be more present and to be more mindful. Because for affirmations, you remember to do it. Mm-hmm. But the very next minute your child doesn't do something, you're giving her another. We may get upset and say something completely different, and those are confusing mixed messages that kids are receiving every single day from. And this is something Monica and me were talking about earlier: is, am I a good child or am I a bad child? Have I done this or have I done that? And children's entire world is how to make mom and dad happy. So I'm doing the affirmations, but then the other parts of the day I may not be. So how our focus is really on creating more conscious, present parenting, more mindful parenting, more mindfulness along with children, that I'm fully present with you. For me to help you navigate your emotions, I need to be present. I need to even know that you're in distress. If I'm doing something and you come to me distressed, I'll probably tell you, come back to me 5 minutes later. And in that moment, the attachment bond is not created for the child to know that there's going to be something there to create or help my inner world to come to some semblance of safety and self-soothing and regulation. So a lot of what we believe is that everything you say is an affirmation, right? So in that sense, every word and every sentence that you say, and every moment you say, I can't do this, that's an affirmation. If you say, I can do this, that's an affirmation. So if you look at it that way, then what you say and the language you use, if you're more conscious, has the effect that an affirmation does, but more consciously. And in every moment, what does a child need? It needs consistency. A child needs consistency. They need regular feedback. They need rupture and repair. And they need that continuously in order to feel safe. and connected, both, and they cannot distinguish between what is outside of them and what is within them. They are pretty much merged with the mother for the first few years of their life. Differentiation happens much later, and sometimes differentiation never happens in sort of unhealthy environments. So I'm living with whatever the chaos is happening around me. That becomes my real world, and that becomes my inner world. And therefore, as Monica says, but then there might not be any present adult, to help me navigate that expression or what's going on within me. And then sort of having empathetic witnesses like the author in me or something similar to that, or having a space where I know that this is a tool that's mine, that I can do safely to express myself, to mix. I mean, children cannot still make sense of their world because, it's not rational. It's all emotion, right? Their brain's not developed there yet. But I can express. I can say I'm feeling sad. I can say I'm feeling angry, and there is somebody who's actually going to read that and kind of say, hey, what's going on? Let's talk about it.
And I think that leads us actually nicely into what we sort of need to talk about, which is sort of the mind empowerment, which I think all of these things are connected to. So, Julia, let's just bring you in and what do you think about how you work, and what does that phrase mean to you with regards to children?
Yeah, let me see. Could you rephrase that question again? It's about.
So mind empowerment in children, sort of going from that. Yeah. So how do we use, what does that mean, and how can we connect with children to?
I think going back to I'm just going to go from the schools and education. So I think going back to what I originally said, it's really about this idea of empowering children. And that in schools means finding out about themselves. How do I know about myself? And not just about academics, but how do I find out about myself? And I think schools can do that in a lot of ways. So, for example, even with learning can be about ownership and choice. It's not just about this is what we're telling you and you need to get it, but it's about actually saying I can also have a choice about what I know, what I learn, and that ownership is also about having voice and agency. And that is part of this understanding of oneself. Who am I? Who am I in this environment? I think it's also, some things have already been said here, but so that's about learning in schools. How do we learn in this environment? And I think in schools, we have to ask the question is, what is the context for learning? What kind of environment is it for the child? We can have mindfulness in schools, and that's very good. But we have to have in schools a whole system that leads towards this idea of well-being. So it's for example, mindfulness is really good. But if you do mindfulness with children or teachers, and then you put them back into a very stressful or toxic environment where they're rushed and they have no time to do anything else, that really isn't a holistic way of getting at that inner space and that inner well-being. So I think there are many things. You can journal in schools. Schools can add to their curriculum this idea of self-reflection. What am I learning? How am I learning? How am I doing in this in this activity, in this way of thinking or learning? So you're really teaching and training young people to look at themselves, look at what something means for them, look at how they're doing. And I think these are all a part of an educational system that probably needs to, it does exist, but it probably needs to be further developed in our schools.
That was going to be my next question to you, actually. Have you found that the schools are receptive to this kind of, or are you getting kind of pushback?
Well, I have this, I worked for the primary years program of the International Baccalaureate. It's called the PYP. And there are many of these aspects that are embedded in there. You talked before about values of virtues. I think that was you, Nyana. And that has a set of qualities and characteristics that we're always trying to help the child to learn. It has self-reflection. It has an idea of student agency. There is this aspect of mindfulness. And it's also this idea. So yes, I think I have seen schools that are doing that, but I also have seen schools that are not doing that. I have seen some schools that are just focused on achievement and academics and a pretty prescriptive way of doing that. And so I think there's no space there. There's no space. Teachers have no space. Children have no space to do all the other things that we're talking about. So I was very fortunate to be able to work many, many years in this primary years program, the International Baccalaureate, where it's all based around inquiry, understanding yourself, exploration, self-reflection. And I see that what comes out of that is really different children. But one thing that I want to go back to in terms of schools that I think is an important message that I want to get across is that, again, it's got to be embedded in the whole system. It's systemic. And if you are just doing that as one teacher, it is good and it makes a big difference. But if the whole school is doing something along the same lines, it makes a phenomenal difference in the life and the well-being of teachers, of children, of families. So it's really got to be this very, very whole school, very broad, organically based way of asking those important questions. How can we have well-being? How can we flourish within our school context, within this place where we are? So I think it's complex. It's not easy. It's very complex because
so you've got quite a broad mix of schools. There are some schools that are delivering it and who are embracing it, but you've still got schools that are not and that are still very heavily academic based, and it's something that we kind of need to shift. Is that what you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think as a society we have to shift this. There's no doubt, no question that it has to shift. And yes, I think schools are trying. They're really trying. How much time, energy, and resources and dialogue that is given to this very deep conceptual transformation by not only the school, but by the forces that are around the school that make decisions. Well, that's the question that I think still has to be asked. Yeah.
And Monica, sort of in terms of mind empowerment, what does that mean to you? And perhaps in a home setting, what do you think that means to you?
For me, mind empowerment is the outcome of a nourished inner world. Because, once a child has an inner positive voice, if it's encouraging or if they believe in themselves, they will be resilient. It will be an outcome of a nurtured inner world. So what happens generally, we parents and at school, competition is embedded in the system, right? And they make children suffer because they constantly comparing themselves to others, and unless they're aware of their unique strengths, they get influenced. If they can't express their emotions, they become conformist. They don't challenge others' opinions. So it is important that first their inner voice should be positive, and it will not remain positive all the time. There will be times when they will have doubts, they will have insecurities, but at that time the affirmations or the positive words that we feed in right from the childhood can help them to overcome that negative voice. So what I believe, if a child is has a positive self-image, if he can fight his doubts, if an environment is given to them where they can express themselves freely, where they feel they are not being judged in school or at home, it's going to be a joint teamwork. It cannot happen only with parents or schools or anything else. If they see this consistent environment everywhere, then only we can help our children to be themselves, be their true self. And that is what empowerment means to me. When their inner world is nourished, they will be resilient, they will be mindful, they will be confident to express their opinions, and they can lead a happy and blissful life without getting influenced by other person's personality. Because today, uh, children are constantly bombarded with information from social media, from other, and they forget themselves. They don't know who they are. they
Yeah.
they want to follow everyone, and without knowing their unique talents, how can they lead a happy or independent life? It will be always leading someone, it will be always following someone, or just remain in doubt whether I should say, whether I should keep quiet, whether I should raise my opinion. So it is, mind empowerment comes from within.
Yeah.
It is an outcome that is from, that is comes from a nurtured inner world.
Yeah. Those of you who have recently joined us, we are talking here about mind empowerment in children, and we've got Julia, Alden, Monica Sood, and Nyana Sabharwal. Is that right?
Sabharwal.
Sabharwal, thank you.
Yeah.
And we're talking about mind empowerment in children and how we, as families, as teachers, can support that within a school environment or within a home environment, and tools that we can use to make sure that in this modern world where children are bombarded with information and what they should and shouldn't be like, and driven by academics, how we can support them to be their best selves and to have an understanding of themselves. So I'm just going to go back to Monica briefly and talk about that, and go back to the affirmations a little bit as a tool that you can use at home, because I know that you have created a book of affirmations for people to use at home. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, and the book is for younger children from 2 to 4 or 5 years old. Yes, because I believe that is the time when we can we can put the seeds of positivity in a child. And affirmations, they don't work, unless they don't work on its own. We have to model the behavior as parents, as teachers. We have to model the behavior we want to instill in our children. So at home, if you are saying, oh, you are loved, I love you, to your child, but when it comes to when your child comes to you and he asks to read you a story, you say, no, I'm busy, I can't do it. So you're confusing them. So you have to create that environment at home or in school, whatever you're saying, it's not confusing your child. So affirmations will work only if you give them deeper understanding by telling them stories around them, around those values, and by telling by highlighting that if your child is caring, is sharing with someone a toy, you must say, oh, you love to share. And that's the way you can reinforce these positive values. And affirmations, because when they repeat it again and again, what happens inside our brain, new neural pathways are formed. And that becomes like, if they do it consistently, repetitively, these pathways get strengthened, and it becomes like a reflex. But this should be done right at the beginning, in the early years, because then they don't question you.
And also, I think, like you say, instead of it's not an academic process, and it's not we will do this today and we will do this, and that is how we're going to achieve the affirmation, because now it has to be almost a creative process. So the affirmation is, as you say, it's a story, it's an action, it's something around that. And that's with the book. There's 52. It sort of takes through the years. There's 52 affirmations, but it's not just about that. It's about having those affirmations and exploring them together in whatever way suits you. As a family or as a unit, but as opposed to it being a task. It shouldn't be a task. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, because that's how it will. Because unless they understand the value of the positive information you want to seed in, unless you tell them stories around it, they will not get it. They will say the phrases, it will not resonate with them. So they need to understand through stories. Again, I'm bringing back stories, because stories help us understand so many things in an organic way. So that is how affirmations can be brought in our life, through stories, through talking about nature, through modeling our behavior, showing what is empathy. If we want to introduce empathy to children, if we are not showing it, we cannot expect them to be empathetic. When a child comes home and they are like, they tell you that something is not right with them, instead of listening to them, you are telling, oh, this is how you should have done it, I've told you so. So you're not showing empathetic behavior, and we can't expect them to be empathetic with others. They're going to do the same. They're going to mimic your behavior. So affirmations work with, you have to be very, very conscious and mindful throughout, how you speak to your child. What words are you using? Are you constantly telling them, or constantly pinpointing about their inadequacies, or are you telling them, yes, you're good, you can do it? So this is the, I think, power of words make an immense difference.
Yeah, and I think also at the moment, I know because again, post-pandemic, children's behaviour can be difficult because obviously they're dealing with lots of things, and I think it can be really difficult for parents because I've experienced it myself, and you get to a point where you end up saying things that you don't mean, or that and you have to have an understanding of how to, because you say words are very powerful, and having an understanding of what you're saying, how you're saying them, and being mindful of that. Nyana, have you got anything to add to that sort of mind empowerment and those affirmations? I know we talked about affirmations before briefly, but other tools that people can use to understand what their children are going through?
So I think one thing that we really believe in is to look at your child as an individual, capable of, having their own beliefs that they come with, no matter how young they might be. They have their own emotions, they have their own experiences, and they're as valid as you and I. And that they require the same amount of, care, if not more, that we would need if we felt that we were having a bad day and needed somebody to listen attentively, without checking a phone, or without, having 50 things that they're doing at the same time, and then helping you process what you're going through. The child's mind is only and only developed in relation to whatever is happening around them, and especially if you look at it more scientifically, the regulation of the parents or the regulation of the people, adults in their environment, because we co-regulate with children. They don't have a regulation system. And only when they have a well-regulated person in front of them can they regulate their own system. And that's how the mind develops, that's how the brain develops. So if I have a stressed teacher in front of me, then my nervous system goes for a toss too, because that's how human beings work. We walk into a room, we sit with someone, we say, this person makes me feel good, because they're, or we say, oh my God, I don't know what it is about that person, I just can't be around them. And that's purely because that's how we work as individuals, as humans. We co-regulate all the time. And regulation affects the brain, it affects your nervous system, it affects your ability to, perform the tasks functionally or not functionally. So I think the empowerment of the mind of a child has so much to do with the individuals and adults around and the environment in which we create for children. And I think that so much of it is on the onus of each individual adult that is in that space to able to say that, what I am doing impacts the child, and to able to recognize what the impact is. I believe again that it takes a village to raise a child. That's an African proverb. And by village, I mean, it's your teachers, it's your parents, it's your, everyone and anybody that comes in contact with the child has an impact on developing that child in certain ways. And I think if we become more conscious of that, I think we'll be creating environments in which children can really thrive and nurture themselves and their parts of themselves that otherwise gets, sort of embedded somewhere or protected or shut down because it hasn't got the space to be expressed or develop or shine. And I think that, children are born whole, and let's keep them whole.
True. Totally agree.
It's very true. I could talk about this all day. Or carry on, Julia. Go on.
Oh, I just wanted to add something to that from the perspective of school. I know we're almost out of time. But I think there are a couple of things that are happening in schools, going back to your other question. For example, Geelong Grammar School in Australia, they have developed a positive education framework. And schools around the world are now using that framework. And it has a lot to do with self-expression. It has a lot to do with positive education. So there are affirmations in that. So it's well worth looking at that. Another one that I know of is our schools that are using something called circle solutions, where children come together. And it's sort of this old idea that I had way back when I was a beginning teacher, a magic circle, you come together. It's circle solutions, though, are asking children through some very, very important social, emotional capacities to solve their own problems. So they're not judging others, they're not blaming others, the teacher's not pointing out, do this or do that, but they're actually learning from each other how to model how they want to be. So they do that as part of the ongoing classroom practice. So I think one other one is the Virtues Project, because I've been doing a lot of research on these things, but the Virtues Project, and it's sometimes when you hear the idea of virtues, people say, oh no, that's religion. But it really isn't. Virtues go back to the dawn of time. And the Virtues Projects are now going into schools, and you were talking about the power of language. So they have 5 strategies that they use in classrooms, and the power of language is the first one, because the power of language is the first and most important way to get what we're trying to get at, children who feel good about themselves. So there are some things, I think, that are happening, some programs that are happening in schools that also are really trying to get at this thing that we're talking about, the inner self, feeling good about yourself, taking on habits of mind and heart that will change not only the individual, but really what we're wanting is to change society as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to finish on. Basically, we need to change society as a whole. But it's a small task. It's a small task. We can do it. But I think it's all really true, isn't it? So we're coming to the end, and we're going to have to finish. But I think that's a really good thing to finish in, is that we all need to take part in this process, and we all need to be involved in whatever way we can to empower our children and ourselves, I think, as well, because if parents are struggling to connect with children or struggling to get through it, that there needs to be a sense of self with the parent as well, and mindfulness within them in order to create that. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely wonderful and fascinating.
Thank you.
But we are going to have to make a close. So I think I'm just going to
Thank you, Nyana, and thank you, Julia, for joining
me.
us.
So great to be with you. Thank you.